Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time to a place that's as harsh as it is beautiful. The world of the Vikings. And we're not here to talk about raids or long ships. Not directly anyway. Instead, we're going to dive into something far more personal. And, in some ways, far more brutal. Their beauty standards. Forget the grimy, unkempt barbarians you see in movies. The real Vikings were obsessed with their appearance, and the lengths they went to for the perfect look. Well, let's just say you'd probably think twice before trying their hair care routine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find other history lovers and night owls like us. And while you're at it, drop a comment letting me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a thick, heavy scent. A cocktail of wood smoke, damp earth, and washed wool, and something vaguely animal. It's not necessarily bad, just overwhelming. It clings to the back of your throat. You open your eyes, but the darkness barely retreats. Above you are heavy, soot-stained wooden beams that seem to stretch into infinity. The air is cold, but you're cocooned in a surprising warmth, buried under a pile of heavy furs and coarse, woven blankets. You're lying on a raised wooden platform that runs along the wall of a vast, long room. As your eyes slowly adjust, you realize you're not alone, not even close. All along the platform, on both sides of the room, are sleeping forms, lumps of fur and fabric that occasionally shift and mutter in a language that sounds like stones tumbling down a hillside. In the center of the hall, a long, shallow pit of embers glows faintly, casting a weak, orange light on the scene. This is a Viking longhouse, your new home. There are no windows, only a small, slatted opening in the roof directly above the fire pit, designed to let some of the smoke out. The key word here is some. Most of it decides to stay, creating a permanent haze that stings your eyes and makes the shadows dance. You sit up slowly, the furs sliding off you. The platform you're on is hard wood, maybe with a thin layer of straw underneath for cushioning. It's not exactly a memory foam mattress. You can feel the splinters through your simple, tunic-like garment. You look across the central aisle. More people. Families. It seems. A child coughs in their sleep. A man with a truly epic beard turns over, his breath a white puff in the frigid air. Privacy, you quickly deduce, is not a concept that has been invented yet. This single, cavernous room is the living room, dining room, and bedroom for dozens of people. Here's a little tidbit for you. Archaeologists have found that many longhouses had a section at one end specifically for livestock during the harshest winter months. So that animal smell you notice, it might be your roommates. Sharing your living space with a cow or a few sheep was completely normal. It provided extra body heat for the house and kept the animals safe. Practical, yes. Aromatic, less so. As the world outside begins to lighten, our pale, gray dawn filters through the smoke hole in the roof. People begin to stir more purposefully. They don't seem to have an alarm clock. But the changing light and the collective morning groans serve the same purpose. You watch as a woman rises, her long hair a cascade of braids. She moves to the central fire, pokes it with a stick, and adds a few pieces of wood, coaxing the embers back to life. There's a quiet efficiency to her movements. a sense of routine that has been performed 1,000 times. You swing your legs over the side of the platform, your bare feet touching the cold, packed earth floor. It's a jarring sensation. You look down at yourself, then at the others. They are tall, broad-shouldered people, their faces shaped by the wind and the cold. There's a sturdiness to them that feels both intimidating and impressive. But as they begin their day, you start to notice the little thing. A man carefully braids a section of his beard. A young woman uses a piece of polished metal to check her reflection. These are not the mindless savages of legend. There is intention here. There is pride. And this is where historians still have a good-natured debate. How was this space truly divided? Were there leather or cloth curtains hung up at night to create a semblance of private sleeping quarters? Or was it a complete free-for-all? Some archaeological sites suggest small partitions, while others show none at all. It likely varied from region to region, and family to family. But for you, right now, in this particular longhouse, it feels like one big, smoky, shared experience. The concept of your room is 1,000 years in the future. For now, this long, dark hall is your entire world, and you're about to discover its very particular, very demanding rules. You stand there for a moment, a slightly bewildered ghost from the future, feeling the chill of the packed earth seep into the soles of your feet. You half expect people to just stumble out into the morning, grab a chunk of dried fish, and get on with the pillaging. That's the cliché, right? The filthy, matted hair barbarian who smells like he wrestled a boggin lost. But what you see next completely shatters that image. It doesn't just crack it. It takes a sledgehammer to it. A man, the one with the impressive beard you saw earlier, stretches and walks past you. He doesn't go for food. He goes to a large wooden bucket near the entrance, filled with what you assume is numbingly cold water from a nearby stream. He plunges his hands in, hisses at the shock of the cold, and then vigorously splashes his face and neck. He runs his wet hands through his long hair and beard, licking them back. H.E.S. not just rinsing off sleep. H.E.S. washing. With purpose. You watch, fascinated, as others follow suit. A group of younger men and women head out of the longhouse entirely, walking towards a stream you can now hear gurgling nearby. There's a low mist hanging over the ground, and their silhouettes moving through it look almost ceremonial. This isn't a reluctant dip. It's a non-negotiable part of the morning routine. You feel a bit grimy just watching them. The man with the beard returns to his spot on the bed. He reaches into a small leather pouch hanging from his belt. You expect him to pull out a whetstone for a knife, or maybe a piece of flint. Instead, he tips out a small collection of objects onto a piece of cloth. They make a soft, metallic clinking sound. You inch a little closer, feigning interest in a loose thread on your tunic. He lays them out neatly. A small, delicate-looking razor made of iron, a pair of bronze tweezers, a fine-toothed comb carved from bone, and a peculiar, slender metal stick with a tiny scoop on the end. You stare at the little scoop. An ear spoon. You've read about them, but seeing one in use is something else. He uses it with a practiced ease that suggests it's as familiar to him as a house key is to you. This isn't a warrior's toolkit. This is a grooming kit. And it's not just him. You see a woman nearby using a similar set to pluck a stray eyebrow hair. A teenager is meticulously cleaning his fingernails with a pointed tool. This is the first major history lesson you learn firsthand. Vikings were practically obsessed with cleanliness and grooming. The stereotype of the dirty barbarian was likely propaganda, spread by the people they raided, like the English monks who were, frankly, not having a good time and had every reason to portray their attackers as subhuman beasts. In reality, archaeological digs have uncovered these grooming kits in astonishing numbers, in both male and female graves. They were clearly prized personal possessions, meant to be taken into the afterlife. To a Viking, being clean was just about hygiene. It was a status symbol. It meant you were civilized. It meant you were a person of worth. Now, here's a point of debate among historians. Just how often did they perform these ablutions? One of the most solid pieces of evidence we have is in their language. The Old Norse word for Saturday is laugardgur, which literally translates to washing day or bath day. This has led some to believe they had a strict, once-a-week full body wash. Perhaps in a sauna-like bath or a hot spring if one was available. But seeing this morning ritual, you realize that's probably too simple an explanation. It's more likely that laugardgur was for the deep clean, the full works, a social event even, but daily washing of the face, hands, and hair. That seems to have been standard practice. An Arab diplomat named Ibn Fadl, who met a group of Vikings along the Volga River in the 10th century, wrote about them with a sort of horrified fascination. He described them as the filthiest of God's creatures because they would all wash their faces and blow their noses in the same basin of water each morning, while he was disgusted by their sharing of water. His account unintentionally confirms that they did, in fact, wash every single day. One man's filthy is another man's consistent morning routine. You glance down at your own hands, then at your simple clothes. You suddenly feel like the odd one out, the unkempt one. Here, in this smoky, primitive-looking hall, you are the grubby visitor in a society of surprisingly well-maintained people. A young woman with hair the color of straw walks past you. She gives you a quick, curious glance. Her face is clean, her skin scrubbed pink by the cold water. She smells faintly of wood smoke and something clean and sharp, like pine. She gestures with her head towards the door, then points to the bucket of water. It's a clear, simple invitation. Your turn. The expectation is clear. In this world, you don't start your day until you've washed away the night. You take a deep breath, steeling yourself for the icy shock, and walk towards the bucket. Your journey into Viking beauty standards has begun, not with something brutal, but with the simple, universal act of washing your face. But don't get too comfortable. The brutal part is coming. You follow the silent instruction and dip your hands into the bucket. The water is so cold it feels like a physical blow. 1,000 tiny needles pricking your skin. You gasp, pulling your hands out instinctively before forcing them back in. You splash your face, the shock of it chasing away the last vestiges of sleep and leaving your skin feeling tight and alive. You don't have a towel, of course, so you just use your hands to squeegee the excess water from your face and run your wet fingers through your hair. It's invigorating. You can see why they do it. With the first ritual of the day complete, you turn your attention back to the others. The woman who prompted you to wash is now sitting on the edge of her sleeping platform, her back to you. In her lap is another essential tool you're beginning to recognize as a Viking must have. A comb. It's not a cheap plastic thing, but a beautifully crafted object. You can see from this distance that it's made of several pieces of bone or antler, riveted together. It's a composite comb, sturdy and built to last. Her hair, which was loosely tied, is now undone. It falls down her back, a thick, heavy curtain. You assumed it was just one color, that pale, straw-like blonde. But as she begins to comb it, you see it's a complex tapestry of shades, from near white to a darker, honey-toned blonde at the roots. She starts at the ends, working out the tangles with a patience that is almost hypnotic. This isn't a quick 5-second brush through before running out the door. This is a task, a tour, a ceremony. Slowly, methodically, she works her way up the length of her hair, section by section. The comb makes a soft, rhythmic scratching sound. It's a peaceful, domestic moment that feels incredibly intimate. Even from across the room, you realize your own hair is a tangled mess from the night spent on the furs. It probably looks like a bird's nest. A very small, very confused bird. This brings you to a fundamental truth of Viking life. Hair is enormously important. For both men and women, long hair was a sign of status, vitality, and freedom. Slaves often had their hair cropped short as a mark of their lowly position. So, after all, healthy head of hair was something to be proud of, something to be cared for and displayed. And that meant combing. Lots and lots of combing. Archaeologists find combs everywhere in the Viking world. They are one of the most common grave goods, right up there with weapons and jewelry. They are found in settlements, in marketplaces, in the wrecks of ships. This tells us they weren't just luxury items. They were everyday necessities. Some are simple, utilitarian tools. Others are works of art, intricately carved with geometric patterns, swirling beasts, or even runes. Owning a beautiful comb was a way to show off your wealth and taste. It was the Viking equivalent of having the latest smartphone. Here's a little-known fact that adds a layer of, let's say, texture to the story. Analysis of these ancient combs has revealed the preserved remnants of head lice and their eggs. So, while they were incredibly clean by the standards of the time, they weren't immune to the common pests of a pre-industrial world. The fine-toothed nature of many of these combs suggests they weren't just for styling. They were also for daily using. It was a practical tool for a persistent problem. So, when you see that woman so carefully combing her hair, she's not just detangling, she's also performing pest control. The woman finishes combing out the full length of her hair. It hangs smooth and straight down her back. But she's not done. She leans forward, gathers the hair into sections, and begins to braid. Her fingers move with a dexterity that's mesmerizing. It's not a simple 3-strand plait. It's a more complex pattern. Tight and neat. Men did this too. You glance at the man with the epic beard. HES now working on his own hair, creating the thick braids that will hang over his shoulders, keeping his hair out of his eyes in a fight or while working. His beard, too, is often braided, sometimes with small beads or metal rings woven in for decoration. This is where historical interpretation gets a little creative. While we know they braided their hair from sagas and some artistic depictions, the exact styles are largely lost to time. We don't have a Viking hair styling manual. Historians Andre and actors have to reconstruct these looks based on fragments of information. Were there specific braids for married women versus unmarried girls? Did a certain number of braids signify a warrior's ring? We can speculate, and many do, but the hard evidence is scant. It's a field where academic research meets a healthy dose of historical imagination. The woman finishes her braids, securing the ends with a bit of colored thread. She shakes her head slightly, the braids swinging with a satisfying weight. The whole process took her a good 15 minutes. You look at your own hair, then around the longhouse. You're starting to understand. To fit in here, to look like you belong, you can't just be clean. You have to be groomed. Your appearance is a declaration of who you are. And your first task, before you even think about breakfast, is to get a comb and tackle the chaotic mess on your head. Because in the Viking world, letting your hair go was like letting yourself go, and that was not an option. As you stand there, contemplating the daunting task of taming your own hair, you notice something else. A common thread running through the appearance of the most striking individuals in the longhouse. It's not just the braids or the cleanliness. It's the color. The woman with the neat plaits. The man with the formidable beard. Several of the younger warriors who are now checking their gear. They all share a similar hair color. It's blonde, not a natural, mousy blonde, but a vibrant, almost artificial-looking shade of pale golden silver. It catches the weak morning light filtering from the smoke hole, creating faint halos around their heads. In contrast, you see others with darker hair, browns and some reds. They are just as clean, their hair just as intricately braided, but they don't seem to command the same immediate visual authority. The blondes seem to glow. You're witnessing a clear and powerful beauty standard in action. In the Viking world, blonde was the color to be. Why blonde? The reasons are likely a mix of geography, mythology, and simple rarity. In Scandinavia, a fair portion of the population is naturally blonde, so it was a familiar and common sight. But it wasn't universal. Many Vikings had brown or red hair. So, being blonde, especially a very pale or bright blonde, would still stand out. It became an ideal, the pinnacle of northern beauty. This ideal was reinforced by their mythology. Many of their most revered gods and goddesses were described as having golden or fair hair. Thor, the mighty god of thunder, was famously red-headed, a notable exception that gave redheads their own fierce prestige. But Esaiyev, his wife, was renowned for her shimmering, golden hair, which was so beautiful that the trickster Loki famously cut it all off as a malicious prank, forcing him to have the dwarves forge her a new head of hair from pure gold. Freya, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, was also typically depicted as a stunning blonde. To have hair the color of the gods was to be seen as blessed, beautiful, and powerful. It was the divine look, and everyone wanted a piece of it. You watch a man with naturally light brown hair. He is handsome and strong-looking, but his hair lacks the luminous quality of the others. He seems to catch the eye of one of the pale blonde women and gives a slight, hopeful smile. She gives him a polite but dismissive nod before turning her attention to one of the bright blonde warriors. It's a subtle interaction, over in a second, but the message is clear. He doesn't quite make the cut. The preference is undeniable. This creates a fascinating social dynamic. If you were a Viking with naturally dark hair, were you just out of luck, destined to be second best in the looks department? Not at all, because the Vikings were nothing if not resourceful. If you weren't born with it, you could make it. And this is where the brutal part of their beauty standards really starts to kick in. They had a method for turning brown hair blonde, but it was a gentle, salon quality, highlighting kit with nourishing conditioner included. It was a harsh, chemical process that would make a modern hairdresser's blood run cold. Here's a cool but slightly gross tidbit for you. Roman writers, who had encountered the Germanic tribes from which the Vikings later descended, were fascinated by their hair. The historian Pliny the Elder wrote about a type of soap made from goat fat tallow and wood ash potash that these northern peoples used. He noted that they used it not just for cleaning, but also as a bleaching agent for their hair. They would smear this potent concoction on their hair and beards and let it sit, sometimes letting the sun enhance its lightening effect. This tradition was carried on and perfected by their Viking descendants. The soap they created was a high-potency lye soap. Lye is a powerful alkali, a caustic substance that is incredibly effective at stripping color. It's the same base chemical used in drain cleaner and for curing olives. It is, to put it mildly, not something you want to casually rub on your body. But for the Vikings, the desire for golden locks outweighed the risks. The debate among scholars he listened if they did it. The Roman accounts and the chemical logic are too strong to ignore, but rather how widespread was the practice. Was it something only the warrior elite did? Or was it a common cosmetic trick used by anyone, man or woman, who wanted to improve their look and social standing? Given the Viking obsession with appearance and the clear preference for blonde hair, it's easy to imagine it was quite common. Any Viking with a bit of ambition and a high tolerance for discomfort would have likely given it a try. You look again at the man with the light brown hair. He looks a little dejected. You have a sudden, sinking feeling. You catch your own reflection in a polished shield leaning against a wall. Your own hair, whatever its natural color, suddenly seems dull, inadequate. The pressure is on. To be beautiful, to be revered, to look like a god, you need to be blonde. And you're beginning to suspect that the path to achieving that divine look is paved with some very, very harsh soap. Your curiosity and a growing sense of social pressure gets the better of you. You need to see this process up close. You subtly trail a man with dark, shoulder-length hair as he heads out of the longhouse. He is not going to the stream to wash. He is heading towards a smaller, separate hut, a thin plume of smoke curling from its roof. He carries a small wooden bowl and a lump of something that looks like dirty, grayish soap. You find a spot where you can peer through a crack in the rough-hewn wooden walls of the hut without being too obvious. The inside is dim and steamy. It's a workshop of sorts, but not for metal or wood. It's for a very specific kind of alchemy. An older woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, is tending to a large pot simmering over a low fire. The air is thick with a sharp, acrid smell that stings your nostrils. Very different from the familiar wood smoke of the longhouse. It's the smell of chemistry. The man hands his bowl to the woman. She nods, then takes a large wooden ladle and scoops a thick, gelatinous substance from the pot into his bowl. It's a murky, off-white color, and it quivers slightly. This is it. This is the magical and dangerous beauty product you've been wondering about, the highlight soap. Let's break down what you're actually looking at. To make this potent stuff, you need two key ingredients: fat and a strong alkali. The fat, as Pliny noted, could be from an animal, like goat tallow or pig lard. It was readily available after any feast or slaughter. The second ingredient, the alkali, came from wood ash, but not just any ash. They would collect hardwood ashes, particularly from beech trees, and leach them with water. This process involves dripping water through the ashes, which dissolves the potassium hydroxide, or lye. The resulting liquid is then boiled down to concentrated. The more you boil it, the more water evaporates, and the stronger the lye solution becomes. Finally, the fat and the lye solution are mixed together and cooked. This process is called saponification. It's the chemical reaction that creates soap. But here's the crucial part. The Vikings were masters of manipulating this recipe. By using a very high ratio of lye to fat, they created a soap that was super fatted, not with excess oil, which makes a moisturizing soap, but with excess lye. This made it incredibly caustic and gave it its powerful bleaching properties. It was less a soap and more a chemical weapon against dark hair pigments. The man takes his bowl of caustic goo and finds a spot on a stool. The old woman gives him a piece of cloth. He dips it into the bowl, getting a large glob of the lye soap onto it, and begins to work it into his dry hair. He starts at the roots, rubbing vigorously. You can see him wince slightly as he does it. This isn't a relaxing, head massaging shampoo experience. It looks uncomfortable. This is a great moment to drop in a strange but related fact about Viking life. Their use of ash wasn't just for soap. Ash was a multi-purpose substance. They used it to preserve food, to clean greasy cooking pots, and as a fertilizer for their crops. Some scholars even suggest that certain types of wood ash were used in rituals or for medicinal purposes. They were intimately familiar with the properties of different types of ash. So, knowing that beech ash produced the strongest life or bleaching wasn't random. It was the result of generations of accumulated folk knowledge. It was science, Viking style. The man methodically covers every strand of his hair and then moves on to his beard, working the corrosive paste deep into the hairs. His entire head is now coated in a thick, grayish-white layer, like H.E.S. Frosted himself. He looks bizarre, like a half-finished statue. He doesn't rinse it out. He just sits there, letting it cook. Historians have long argued about the specifics of this process. Did they let it dry completely? Did they sit in the sun to accelerate the chemical reaction? A process modern hairdressers call heat activation. The sagas and historical accounts don't give us a step-by-step guide. They just mention that the hair was lightened. It's through experimental archaeology, modern folks trying to replicate these ancient technologies, that we've pieced together the most likely methods. And all of them involve leaving a highly corrosive substance on your scalp for an extended period of time. You watch the man, who now has his eyes closed, his face set in a mask of stoic endurance. H.E.S. not going anywhere for a while. The desire to fit the aesthetic ideal, to look like a hero from the sagas, is so strong that he is willing to sit perfectly still while a chemical substance slowly eats away at the color in his hair. You touch your own hair, suddenly grateful for your modern pH balanced. No more tear shampoo. The Viking path to beauty is a committed one, and it starts with a bowl of something that could probably strip paint off a long ship. And you haven't even gotten to the side effects yet. You continue to watch from your hiding spot, morbidly fascinated. The man's, it's on the stool, perfectly still. 10 minutes pass, then 20. The lye soap on his hair has started to dry into a crusty white shell. You can only imagine the sensation. A slight tingling at first, perhaps, then an itching. Now, it must be a persistent, burning feeling. This isn't just a beauty treatment. It's an endurance test. Suddenly, you see him flinch. A genuine, involuntary jerk of his head. He brings a hand up to his temple, but stops just short of scratching. His knuckles white. He knows better than to touch it. Scratching would only break the skin and invite the corrosive lye to do far more damage. This is the moment where vanity and agony intersect. The chemical reaction is in full swing. The alkaline lye is swelling the hair shafts, opening up the cuticles, and breaking down the natural melanin pigments that give his hair its dark color. It's an effective process, but it's also completely indiscriminate. It can't tell the difference between a hair follicle and the delicate skin of your scalp. This is the brutal reality of the Viking quest for blonde hair. Chemical burns were not a possible side effect. They were an expected part of the process. If you left the lye on for too long, or if the mixture was too strong, you could end up with painful sores, blistering, and even patches of permanent hair loss. You were literally burning your way to beauty. Each time someone underwent this process, they were rolling the dice. They might come out with the perfect shade of sun-kissed blonde, or they might come out with a scalp that looked like it had been in a fight with a very angry jellyfish. And here's a quirky, slightly horrifying detail. The Vikings might have had a way to soothe these burns, using another readily available resource. Some theories suggest they would use things like goose fat or other animal fats as a primitive soothing balm after the fact. Imagine that. You burn your scalp with a lye solution made from fat and dash, and then you soothe the burn with more fat. The entire cosmetic cycle was deeply rooted in the animal and plant world around them. There was no separate, sterile laboratory producing these things. Your beauty products came from the same sources as your dinner. The man on the stool lets out a slow, controlled breath through his nose. He is clearly in discomfort. The old woman who mixed the soap watches him with a dispassionate, practiced eye. She's seen this hundreds of times. She says something to him in that guttural, stony language, and he gives a curt nod. It's time. He gets up stiffly and heads to a large barrel of rinse water at the back of the hut. He plunges his head in, again and again, scrubbing furiously to get the caustic mixture out. The water immediately turns milky and clouded. He gasps as the cool water hits his inflamed scalp, and you can't tell if it's from relief or renewed pain. After several minutes of frantic rinsing, he emerges, shaking his head like a dog and sending droplets of water flying. His hair is now plastered to his head. It's several shades lighter, a sort of murky, orangey blonde. It's not the pale, silver gold ideal just yet. This process often had to be repeated. Each application would strip more color, getting the hair progressively lighter, but also causing more and more damage. His hair will be incredibly dry and brittle. It will break easily. He has traded the health of his hair for the color of it. The question of permanent damage is something historians still puzzle over. Did repeated light treatments lead to widespread baldness in older Vikings who were trying to maintain their youthful, blonde appearance? It's almost impossible to know for sure from skeletal remains alone, as hair rarely survives 1,000 years in the grave. But based on our modern understanding of chemistry, it's a very likely outcome. The swaggering, blonde Viking warrior might very well have become a balding, middle-aged man with a chronically irritated scalp. The man runs his fingers through his now lighter, damaged hair. He looks at his reflection in a pail of still water. He seems satisfied. The pain was worth it. The risk was worth it. He has moved a step closer to the ideal. He has proven his toughness and his dedication to his own image. You shrink back from the crack in the wall, a newfound respect and a slight sense of horror dawning on you. You thought braiding was a commitment. This is a whole other level. This is self-inflicted chemical warfare in the name of fashion. You look at the truly beautiful, pale blonde Vikings in a new light. Their hair isn't just a genetic gift. For many of them, it's a hard-won trophy, a testament to their ability to endure pain for the sake of perception. And you realize, with a sinking feeling, that if you're going to survive and thrive here, you might have to face that bowl of lye yourself. After witnessing the ordeal of chemical bleaching, you decide to focus on a less painful aspect of Viking hair care for a while. You retreat to the relative calm of the longhouse, where the morning's grooming rituals are winding down. The man who bleached his hair is now sitting quietly, his hair drying in the smoky air. He won't be able to do much with it today. It's too fragile. But all around you, others are putting the finishing touches on their elaborate hairdos. You watch the woman with the straw-colored hair who first prompted you to wash. Her to neat braids are not enough. She is now engaged in a more complex act of styling, assisted by another woman. This is clearly a social activity. They sit facing each other, chatting quietly as they work on each other's hair. The second woman is taking small sections of the first woman's hair from the crown of her head and creating a series of small, tight braids that run along her scalp, feeding them into the two larger plaits that hang down her back. It's intricate, beautiful and looks incredibly time-consuming. This is the next level of Viking hair artistry. It was just about color or a simple plait down the back. It was about structure and complexity. The styles we see in modern TV shows, with shaved sides and complex top knots, are often based on one specific historical account, that of the Arab diplomat Ben Fadl. He described the Rus Vikings he met as having hair braided in style, but his description is frustratingly vague. He mentions they are tattooed from fingertips to neck with dark green, tree-like patterns, another aspect of their appearance we'll get to. But when it comes to hair, the specifics are lost. This has left a huge canvas for interpretation. Modern reenactors and historical dramas have filled in the gaps with styles that are visually striking, but not always historically verifiable. The popular Ragnar haircut from the show Vikings, with its shaved sides and long, braided ponytail, is a great example. Is it plausible? Yes. Is there definitive proof that a 9th century chieftain wore his hair exactly like that? No. Historians are in a constant debate about this, separating the Hollywood Viking from the historical one. The truth is likely a spectrum of styles, varying by region, social status, and personal taste. Some might have had shaved sections, while others preferred a full head of long, flowing, braided hair. You notice that it's not just the women. A man with a magnificent, fiery beard is having it meticulously groomed. The beard itself is divided into 2 sections, each one twisted and braided into a thick rope of hair. The ends are bound with fine, silver wire. His mustache is separate, long and waxed into 2 sharp points that extend past the corners of his mouth. It's a work of art that frames his face and makes him look incredibly fierce. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice. A well-groomed beard was a sign of masculinity and maturity. An unkempt, straggly beard would have been seen as slovenly. Here's a peculiar little factoid about Viking hair and beards. Nicknames. The Norse were famous for their descriptive, and often brutally honest, nicknames. Many of these related directly to a person's appearance, especially their hair. We have historical records of people named Fort Beard, like the famous King Sweyn Beard, whose beard was likely split into fine hair Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, and Sulk Beard. These names tell us that the style and texture of one's hair and beard were defining characteristics, important enough to become a part of your identity. So, your hairstyle was just fashion. It could literally become your name. You see a young boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting patiently while his father braids his long, blonde hair for him. HES learning. HES being taught that this is part of what it means to be a man in this society. It's a skill passed down through generations. The dexterity required is impressive. Their large, calloused hands, accustomed to wielding axes and doors, are surprisingly nimble as they weave the strands of hair together. The variety is stunning. You see simple braids, fiste braids, complex for strand braids. Some have their hair pulled back into a simple knot at the nape of the neck, a style known from looking at carvings and figures from the era. This particular style, a looped ponytail, is often called a Viking knot. Some women have woven colorful ribbons or strips of cloth into their braids, adding flashes of red or blue to their look. It dawns on you that hair in this world is like clothing. It's a way to express your personality, your status, your profession, and even your marital status, though the specific codes for that are something scholars still debate. Was a certain braid reserved for warriors? Did married women wear their hair up, while unmarried girls wore it down? These are tantalizing questions with no firm answers, leaving a fog of mystery over the exact social grammar of Viking hair, you finally find a simple, three-toothed comb made of wood, discarded on a bench. It's not fancy, but it will have to do. You begin the slow, arduous process of working through your own tangled hair. As you comb, you think about the commitment, the time, the effort, the pain of bleaching, the social significance of it all. This isn't just vanity, it's a language. And if you want to be understood in this time and place, you have to learn to speak it, starting with a simple braid. Now that you've mostly tamed your own hair into a semblance of order, you find yourself focusing on the men again, specifically on their facial hair. You notice the red-bearded man with his silver-wired braids, and the first man you saw this morning with his epic, full beard. But as you look around, you see that beards are not a one-size-fits-all affair. They are as varied and as deliberately styled as the hair on their heads. You see men with full, flowing beards that cover their chests, but they are always combed and neat. You see others with shorter, more practical beards that are trimmed to follow the jawline. Then there are the mustaches. Some are trimmed short, while others, like the red-bearded man's, are long and waxed. It's clear that a man's beard was his personal billboard, a key part of his masculine identity. The beard was a powerful symbol of manhood and honor in Norse society. To insult a man's beard was a grave offense. In some old Scandinavian law codes, there were specific fines for wrongfully pulling or cutting another man's beard. It was considered a profound humiliation, akin to striking you. An old Norse saying goes something like, "A beardless chin is a child's chin," implying that a man without a beard was not fully a man. You watch as a younger man, perhaps in his late teens, attempts to groom his beard. It's a bit patchy, not yet full and glorious. He combs it with a small bone comb, trying to make it look fuller than it is. An older warrior claps him on the back with a booming laugh, says something that makes the young man turn red, and points to his own magnificent beard as if to say, "One day, son, there's a clear hierarchy here." A great beard was armed with agent. One assumes testosterone. This obsession with facial hair leads to a rather interesting and slightly quirky grooming habit, just as they bleached the hair on their heads. Many Vikings also bleached their beards. They wanted that same divine, golden blonde look for their facial hair. Imagine the process you witnessed earlier. The caustic soap, the burning, the rinsing, but applied directly to your face. The skin on your face and neck is even more sensitive than your scalp. The dedication required to endure a live bleached beard is staggering. But here's a weird little detail that many people miss. The color wasn't always uniform. Some historical sources and sagas describe men with hair of one color and the beard of another. A man might have a naturally brown head of hair, but bleach his beard blonde, or vice versa. This created a striking, two-tone look that was deliberately cultivated. Why? It was a way to stand out, to create a unique personal style. It was the Viking version of punk rock fashion, using color to make a bold statement. The debate among historians on this topic is subtle but important. Was the two-tone look a common fashion statement, or was it a rare affectation of a few flamboyant individuals? The sagas, written hundreds of years after the Viking Age, are our main source for these kinds of descriptions, and they can be prone to exaggeration. However, the sheer practicality of it makes sense. It might be easier to maintain a bleached beard than a full head of bleached hair, or it might just have been a look someone tried that caught on. Without photographic evidence, we are left to interpret these tantalizing textual clues. You notice a man who seems to be clean-shaven, which surprises you. But as he turns his head, You see the dark stubble on his cheeks and jaw. He is not naturally beardless. He shaves. He must do it almost daily to maintain that look. You remember the small iron razor in the grooming kit you saw this morning. It was just for trimming edges. It could be used for a full shave. Being clean-shaven was another valid and high-maintenance style choice. It required a sharp razor, a steady hand, and a tolerance for the nicks and cuts that were inevitable without modern shaving cream. You see the man with the patchy beard sigh and put his comb away. He seems resigned to his current state. He is in that awkward phase of manhood. Not a boy, but not yet a man with a beard worthy of a saga. He is, in a word, skegorses, the old Norse word for beardless. It was not a compliment. It was often used as an insult, a way to question a man's maturity or courage. The beard was more than just hair. It was a symbol of honor, a marker of age and status, and a canvas for personal expression. It could be braided, bleached, waxed, trimmed, or grown to epic proportions. To be a man in the Viking world meant you had to make a decision about your face, and that decision said a lot about who you were, or who you wanted to be. Looking at the glorious beards around you, you realize that the pressure on the men to perform masculinity was just as intense as the pressure on everyone to conform to the blonde ideal. It was all part of the same complex system of visual communication, where every hair mattered. As your eyes drift from the magnificent beards and braids, you start to notice a more subtle, yet equally striking, detail in the faces around you. It's in the eyes. Many of the Vikings, both men and women, have a dark, smudgy line drawn around their eyes. It's not neat and precise, like a modern liquid liner. It's a smoky, kohl-like effect that makes their eyes often a startlingly pale blue or gray, pop with an intense, dramatic contrast. The first time you see it up close is on the woman with the straw blonde braids. She turns to speak to someone, and the firelight catches her face. The dark pigment encircling her eyes makes her gaze seem deeper, more piercing. It's incredibly beautiful, but also intimidating. Her eyes look bigger, more defined, and fiercely alert. It's a look that says, I am not to be trifled with. You realize this is another core component of the Viking aesthetic. It's not just about hair. It's about framing the face and accentuating the features. And the most expressive feature of all, the eyes, were given special attention. This practice is confirmed by both archaeological evidence and written accounts. The 10th century heir of traveler, Ibn Fadlan, whom we met earlier, was once again a key observer. In his writings about the Rus Vikings he encountered on the Volga River, he noted they also used kohl for their eyes, coming from the Middle East, where kohl had been used for millennia. Ibn Fadlan would have recognized it instantly. He states it as a simple fact, another part of their daily grooming routine. So, what exactly were they using? The product was known as kohl, but it washed one single substance. It was a general term for a dark cosmetic powder. In the Middle East, it was often made from finely ground galena lead sulfide, or ST, ibnite antimine sulfide. The Vikings, ever resourceful, likely made their own version from locally available materials. The most probable ingredient was finely ground and powdered antimine, lead, crushed charcoal, or even soot scraped from the bottom of a cooking pot, mixed with a little animal fat or oil to create a paste. You watch a young warrior applying his. He has a small, smooth, flat stone that he uses as a palette. On it is a small mound of black powder. He dips a slender stick, perhaps made of wood, bone, or bronze, into the powder then carefully traces the rim of his eyelids. He is not trying to be subtle. He draws a thick, dark line all the way around, top and bottom, extending it slightly at the outer corners. The effect is instantaneous. His pale eyes, which were already striking, now look like chips of ice set in charcoal. It enhances his warrior-like appearance, making his stare more direct and menacing. This is the dual purpose of Viking eyeliner: beauty and intimidation. For a woman, it enhanced her beauty, drawing attention to her eyes as a focal point of her face. For a man, it did the same, but it also served as a kind of war paint, a shield wall of Vikings, all with their hair bleached blonde, their beards braided, and their eyes outlined in black. Would have been a terrifying sight. It was psychological warfare, expressed through cosmetics. It dehumanized them just enough, making them look like something more than human. Fiercer, more focused, like wolves or hawks. Here's a fascinating little side note on the subject. The word kohl itself has ancient roots, but in the Nordic regions, the substance might have been known by other names. One of the materials they likely used was a type of lignite, a soft black coal, known in English as jet. In Old Norse, the word for jet was skartsteinen, or blackstone. It's highly plausible that this was one of the key ingredients they would grind up to produce their signature dark eyeliner. It was a natural resource, readily available in certain areas, particularly in places like Britain where the Vikings settled. The academic debate here revolves around the exact composition and prevalence. Was the use of kohl universal, or was it, like the hair bleaching, something more common among the warrior class and the wealthy? The presence of potential kohl grinders and applicators in graves suggests it was widespread, but it's hard to say for sure. Some historians argue that its primary purpose was not cosmetic at all, but practical, that the dark pigment helped reduce glare from the sun, snow, and water, much like the eye black used by modern athletes. It's a compelling theory, and the truth is probably that it served both functions. It was practical and it made you look cool and scary. For a Viking, that's a win-win. You see a mother gently applying a faint smudge of the dark powder around her young daughter's eyes, just teaching her, just as the boy was taught to braid his hair. The girl is being taught how to adorn her face. It's a cultural inheritance, a rite of passage. You look at your own unadorned eyes in your reflection. Once again, you feel plain, understated. In this world, a naked face is an unfinished face. The final touch, the thing that brings the whole look together and gives it that iconic, fierce edge, is the dark, smoky line that turns a simple gaze into a powerful statement. The desire to fit in, to not look like a perpetual outsider, is a powerful motivator. You've seen the hair, the beards, and now the eyes. You decide you need to try it for yourself. But you can't just ask for a handout of precious kohl powder. That would be admitting your forensics, your ignorance. You need to acquire it the way they would. By making it, you spend the morning observing. You notice that the black powder isn't just kept in pouches. It's made fresh, or at least prepared in small batches. You watch the old woman from the Lysop hut. She's not bleaching hair now. She's sitting outside the one house, using a small stone mortar and pestle. You inch closer, pretending to be busy mending a tear in your tunic, a skill you're rapidly having to learn. She has a few lumps of what looks like charcoal, but it's denser, shinier. It must be the skartsteinen, the jet or lignite kohl you heard about. She places a small piece in the stone bowl and begins to grind. It's a slow, patient process. She crushes it, then grinds it, then crushes it again. Her movements rhythmic and economical. She is reducing the solid stone to a fine, black dust. The sound is a soft, gritty whisper. This is the first step, and it requires the right tools. A good mortar and pestle, made of hard, non-porous stone, would have been a valuable household item. Archaeologists have found them, sometimes with trace residues still inside, giving us clues as to what they were used for. It was just for grinding spices or grains. It was for making pigments, for medicine, for cosmetics. It was the Viking Age equivalent of a food processor. After grinding the stone into a powder as fine as flour, the old woman does something interesting. She takes a tiny drop of oil from a small clay vessel. It could be fish oil, or perhaps a plant-based oil like linseed oil. She adds it to the powder. Then, with the pestle, she begins to mix it. Not grinding now, but blending. The powder and oil come together to form a thick, slightly greasy paste. This is the secret. The fat is the binder. It makes the kohl easier to apply, helps it stick to the skin, and gives it that characteristic smudgy white quality. Pure powder would just flake away. Now for a wonderfully weird fact about their ingredients. While charcoal and jet were likely common, analysis of some cosmetic residues from the period have shown traces of lead sulfide. Lead. We now know it's a potent neurotoxin, but back then, its properties were mysterious and magical. Ground galena lead sulfide produces a beautiful, silvery black powder that shimmers. It would have been a highly prized cosmetic. So, in their quest for beauty, some Vikings were literally applying a known poison to their eyelids every single day. The long-term health effects would have been not great, but the look was killer. In more ways than one, you decide to try a simpler, safer method. You wait until the cooking fire in the longhouse has died down a bit. You find a flat, smooth stone and carefully scrape some of the fine, black soot from the underside of the cauldron that hangs over the fire. It's greasy and intensely black. You've got your pigment. For a binder, you need fat. You spot a piece of left-over cooked salmon from the morning meal. You discreetly pinch off a tiny piece of the fatty skin and rub it on your stone palette, creating a small, oily slick. Then you mix in the soot. The result is a crude, but effective, black paste. It smells faintly of fish and smoke. It's not glamorous, but it's authentic. Now for the applicator. You don't have a fancy carved bone stick. You find a small, straight Wiggins smooth one end with a sharp stone until it's no longer splintery. You dip your makeshift applicator into your fishy, sooty concoction. You bring it up to your eye. This is the moment of truth. You try to hold your hand steady. You look at your faint reflection in a puddle of water outside. You trace a line along your lower lid. It's clumsy, too thick in one spot, too thin in another. You look less like a fierce warrior and more like you've been crying for a week. You try again, smudging it with your finger to even it out. That's bitter. It creates that smoky, lived-in look. You do the other eye. They're not perfectly symmetrical, but from a distance, it might pass. The debate among historians about the application process is ongoing. Then they use sticks, as you are, or brushes made of fine animal hair. Did they apply it with their fingertips? The answer is probably all of the above. Different people would have had different techniques and different tools, depending on their wealth and personal preference. Some of the most delicate artifacts found in grooming kits are thin bronze or bone rods, perfectly suited for this very task. They are the silent witnesses to these daily cosmetic rituals. You look at your reflection again. The effect is undeniable. Your eyes look different. more defined, more intense. You feel a strange sense of belonging. You've just participated in a ritual that has been performed in this spot for generations. You've literally painted a piece of this culture onto your own face. You smell faintly of smoked fish, but you look just a little bit more like a Viking. And in this world, that's a good first step. Feeling slightly more integrated with your new, smoky-eyed look. You spend the rest of the day observing the rhythms of longhouse life. People are mending tools, weaving cloth, telling stories. The atmosphere is surprisingly domestic. But then, two men who have been out hunting return, carrying a deer slung on a pole between them. There's a murmur of approval. A feast is in the future. One of the hunters, a man in his prime with a broad chest and a confident swagger, laughs at something his companion says. He throws his head back, and his mouth opens in a wide, joyous grin. And you see it. Your brain takes a second to process what you're looking at, because it makes no sense. His front teeth, the upper incisors, are not smooth. They have a series of deep, horizontal grooves filed directly into the enamel. They are perfectly parallel, cut with an almost machine-like precision. It's not decay. It's not an injury. It's intentional. It's a deliberate, permanent, and shocking modification. It transforms his friendly smile into something utterly alien and intimidating. You stare, trying not to be rude, but it's impossible to look away. The hunter catches your gaze and his smile widens, as if HES proud of your reaction. HES showing them off. This isn't something to be hidden. It's a feature to be flaunted. You have just come face to face with one of the most brutal and mysterious aspects of Viking culture. Intentional dental mutilation. This is not a myth from the sagas or a fanciful tale. It's hard, physical proof, found directly on the bones of the people who lived here. Archaeologists have discovered dozens of skulls, primarily in Sweden, particularly on the island of Gotland, but also in Denmark and even in England where Vikings settled, that show this exact modification. The individuals are almost exclusively male. The marks are almost always on the upper front teeth. They consist of 1-2 perfectly filed horizontal lines, running across the surface of the tooth. You try to imagine the process. There are no power tools here. No dental drills. This would have been done by hand, with a small, sharp metal file. A friend would have had to hold the man's head steady, perhaps even prying his lips out of the way, while another person painstakingly, carefully, scraped away the enamel. The sound alert, the high-pitched screech of metal on tooth, would be enough to make you shudder, and the pain, while the enamel itself has no nerves. Once you get close to the dentin underneath, the sensitivity would be excruciating. There were no anesthetics. This was a procedure endured while fully conscious, for the sole purpose of altering one's appearance. This discovery is relatively recent in the grand scheme of Viking studies, and it has thrown a massive wrench into our understanding of their aesthetics. Why would they do this? It's the central question that has historians and archaeologists locked in a fascinating debate. There are several leading theories. The most popular theory is that it was a form of status marking for a specific group, likely a closed society of elite warriors or merchants. To have these marks, you had to be initiated. You had to prove you could endure the pain of the procedure, marking you as a member of an exclusive brotherhood. When you smiled, you were showing your credentials, your membership card, etched directly into your teeth. It was a signal to other Vikings that you were part of the club. Another theory suggests it was purely for intimidation. Imagine facing a wall of these warriors in battle. They raise their shields. They scream their war cries, and they give you a terrifying, well-grooved grain. It's psychological warfare at its most personal. It makes them look inhuman, like monsters or demons. It would be deeply unsettling to an opponent who had never seen anything like it. A strange but compelling piece of supporting evidence comes from the animal world. Apes, like baboons and mandrills, often display their large canine teeth as a threat. Some historians speculate that this dental modification was a way for humans, who lack impressive canines, to turn their own teeth into a weapon of intimidation. A less common but equally plausible idea is that it was simply a form of decoration, like a tattoo. In a world where you might not have many possessions, your own body becomes the ultimate canvas for displaying your identity and your status. Your hair, your beard, your skin, and even your teeth were all fair game for modification and adornment. You look back at the hunter, HES now playfully showing his teeth to a small child, who giggles and touches the strange grooves with a tiny finger. In this context, it's not scary. It's just, Dad, it's normalized. This shocking body modification is a part of their everyday life, as normal to them as someone wearing earrings would be to you. You can't help but touch your own smooth, unremarkable front teeth. You think about the sound of the file, the grit, the pain. The Lysol burns suddenly seem like a minor inconvenience in comparison. This was a whole other level of commitment. This was permanent. You can't wash it out or let it grow back. This was a choice that you would carry with you to your grave. And it's a stark reminder that the Viking pursuit of a distinct identity was not for the faint of heart. Your mind is still reeling from the sight of the filed teeth. The hunter has now moved to the central fire, his smile no longer on display, but the image is seared into your memory. You need to understand more. You can't just ask, "Hey, why did you let someone take a metal file to your face?" You have to be more subtle. You find a quiet corner where an older man is sharpening a small knife on a whetstone. His movements are slow and deliberate. He has a kind face. And more importantly, his teeth are smooth and unmarked. He seems approachable. You sit nearby, feigning interest in the sparks his knife is making, and after a moment of comfortable silence, you gesture vaguely towards the hunter. You ask a simple, open-ended question in the broken, page-in version of their language you're slowly acquiring. Something like, "Strong warrior, has teeth, marked." The old man stops sharpening his knife. He looks at the hunter, then back at you. He nods slowly. He understands what you're asking. He begins to explain, not with a lot of words, but with gestures and a few key phrases. He mimes the action of holding someone's head. Then he picks up a small metal file from his toolkit and makes the motion of scraping it across his own front teeth, producing a high-pitched, imaginary scream, the sound that makes the hair on your arm stand up. He confirms your worst fears. It was done exactly as you imagined, with a file, by another person, with no pain relief. He adds a detail you hadn't considered. The person doing the filing had to be incredibly skilled. A slip of the hand could chip the tooth, gouge the gums, or slice the lips. It was the job for an amateur. This was the work of a specialist, an artist whose medium was human bone. You had to trust your filer implicitly. This introduces a whole new layer to the practice. It was just about enduring the pain. It was about finding and possibly paying a craftsman with the steady hands and expertise to perform the procedure correctly. This suggests it was a spontaneous act of bravado but a considered, planned event. Here's a small but fascinating detail that archaeologists have uncovered by studying the skulls with a microscope. The grooves are astonishingly precise. The bottom of the filed channel is oft unperfectly flat and smooth. indicating a very controlled and repeated action with a fine-toothed file. They weren't just hacking away at the tooth. They were sculpting it. This level of craftsmanship rules out the idea that it was some kind of self-mutilation done in a frenzy. This was cold, calculated, and highly skilled work. The old man then mimes something else. He puffs out his chest, holds his head high, and puts on an arrogant expression. HES showing you the attitude of the man with the filed teeth. They were proud. It was a mark of distinction. He taps his own, plain teeth and shrugs, as if to say, "I'm just a regular fellow." This seems to confirm the theory that it was for a specific group. Not all men did this. Perhaps he was a farmer, not a far-roaming merchant or a professional warrior, and therefore not eligible or interested in joining that particular club. The debate among scholars rages on about the who and why. A recent study analyzed the locations where these skulls were found. They weren't just in one warrior burial ground. They were found in different types of graves, in different regions, suggesting it might not have been one single, unified Viking warrior club, but rather a fashion or a cultural practice that spread along trade routes. Perhaps a group of merchants started it to identify each other in foreign ports. A kind of walking, smiling passport. Then, because it looked intimidating and cool, warriors started to adopt it. This is a classic example of how cultural trends can spread. Something starts with a small, specific group for a practical reason, and then it's co-opted by others for purely aesthetic or social reasons. Think of modern trends, like tattoos or piercings, which may have originated in specific subcultures before going mainstream. The Viking tooth filing phenomenon could be an ancient version of that same process. The old man finishes his explanation. He gives you a knowing look, as if to ask, "So, are you thinking of getting it done?" You shake your head quickly, a little too quickly. The thought of that sound, that feeling, no amount of social status is worth that. You thank the old man for his time. He just nods and goes back to sharpening his knife. You are left with a profound sense of the extremity of Viking aesthetics. You had thought the lye soap was the pinnacle of their painful beauty rituals. You were wrong. The lye was a temporary discomfort for a temporary result. The hair would eventually grow back in its natural color. But this was forever. It was a commitment to an identity, etched into your very skeleton. It was a painful, bloody, and terrifyingly permanent art form. And you've just learned it was even more complex and skillful than you could have imagined. Just when you think you've fully wrapped your head around the brutal reality of Viking dental modification, you notice another detail. It's so subtle, you almost miss it. The hunter with the filed teeth is drinking from a horn of meat. As he tips his head back, the firelight illuminates his open mouth again. You lean forward slightly, squinting. The grooves in his teeth, they aren't just empty channels. There's something in them, a hint of color. You get a better look a few minutes later when HES talking animatedly with another man. He laughs, and this time you see it clearly. The deep, horizontal grooves filed into his front teeth have been filled with a dark pigment. It looks like a black or a deep red substance, packed tightly into the man-made channels. This changes everything. It was just about removing parts of the tooth to create a pattern. It was about creating a vessel to hold color. The act of filing was only step one. Step two was to inlay these grooves with pigment, turning his teeth into a piece of intricate, personalized jewelry. His smile wasn't just intimidated. It was decorated. The shock of this hits you almost as hard as the initial discovery. The level of detail, the sheer artistic intent, is mind-boggling. They weren't just scarring themselves for status. They were coloring their scars. You think back to the process. After the agonizing filing was complete, while the tooth was still rind sensitive, they would have had to rub this pigment into the fresh grooves. What was it made of? The most likely candidates are the same things they used for other decorations. For black, they would have used powdered charcoal or soot, perhaps mixed with a bit of resin or tar to make it stick. Birch bark tar was a common adhesive in the Viking Age, a waterproof, sticky substance they used for everything from sealing boats to mending pots. It would have been perfect for this. For reed, the options were more exotic. They could have used ground-up iron oxide, rust, essentially, which produces a rich, earthy red pigment known as ochre. This was a common pigment used in paint and dye across the ancient world. They would have ground the ochre into a fine powder and packed it into the grooves. Imagine the visual effect. A fierce warrior grins, and you see a flash of bone white teeth striped with blood-red lines. The intimidation factor just went up by 1,000. Here's a fantastic and slightly macabre detail for historians to chew on. The archaeological evidence for this is incredibly strong. When scientists examined the famous Scotland skulls under powerful microscopes, they found the remnants of these pigments, resinous materials like tar-colored mineral traces, still embedded in the dental grooves after more than a millennium in the ground. This isn't speculation. It's a scientific fact. They were coloring their teeth. The biggest debate surrounding this practice isn't whether they did it, but what the colors signified. This is where we enter the realm of educated guesswork. Because the Vikings left us no instruction manual. Did black have a different meaning from red? Was black for warriors and red for merchants? Or was it purely a matter of personal aesthetic choice, like picking the color of your shirt? One theory proposes that the colors might have been linked to a specific achievement. Perhaps you earned your first black stripe after your first successful raid. Maybe a red stripe signified you had captained your own ship. This would turn a man's smile into a living resume, a record of his accomplishments for all to see. It's a compelling idea, but impossible to prove. Another theory suggests the colors could have had tribal or family significance, with different clans using different colors to identify their members. In a world without formal uniforms or banners for every occasion, your body became your flag. You look at the hunter again with this new knowledge. His smile is no longer just a shocking modification. It's a statement of identity, a piece of art, a biography, and a thread, all rolled into one. The sheer dedication is what gets you. The pain of the filing, followed by the meticulous, probably painful, process of inlaying the color, and the maintenance. It likely had to be touched up periodically as the pigment wore away. This was high-maintenance body art of the most extreme kind. It makes the daily application of kohl eyeliner seem like a triviality. The kohl washed off. The braids could be undone. Even the live bleached hair would eventually grow out. But the filed and colored teeth were a lifelong commitment. It was a braid, in the most literal sense of the word. You realize the Vikings didn't draw a line between the body and the battlefield, or between art and identity. It was all one and the same. Their bodies were their stories, and they wrote those stories with blades, with combs, with needles, and, most terrifyingly of all, with files and pigments on their very own teeth. You shudder, and for the first time, you are truly, deeply grateful for your boring, smooth, uncolored teeth. You tear your gaze away from the man's astonishing teeth, feeling like you've seen something private and profound. You need a break from the intensity of all this deliberate, painful modification. You decide to focus on something that seems more natural, less self-inflicted. You start looking at people's skin. At first glance, it just looks like skin, weathered, Certainly, the faces of the older men and women are deeply lined. They're skinned and unleathery from a lifetime of exposure to sun, wind, and sea salt. It's the kind of skin that tells a story of hard work and outdoor living. But as you look closer, you realize that even here, in the texture of their skin, there's an aesthetic at play. You notice one of the older warriors, the man who clapped a young, patchy-bearded boy on the back. He is sitting by the fire, his tunic sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His forearms are a tapestry of old scars. There are thin, white lines from past cuts, a puckered, star-shaped scar that looks like it came from a puncture wound, and a long, faded burn mark. In your world, these might be seen as imperfections, things to be hidden or minimized with creams and treatments. Here, he seems completely unbothered by that. In fact, he rests his arm on his knee in a way that makes them visible. A younger man sits beside him, listening to a story. The younger man points to one of the most prominent scars on the old warrior's. Armand asks a question. The old warrior laughs, a deep, rumbling sound, and launches into her tale. The scar isn't an imperfection. It's a talking point. It's a chapter in his life story, worn on his skin for everyone to read. Here in that scar, it's a mark of survival, a testament to a fight won or a danger overcome. You're witnessing another fundamental aspect of the Viking beauty standard, particularly for men. A life lived without incident, without marks, was a life unlived. Scars were not ugly. They were proof of experience, courage, and resilience. A smooth, unblemished arm on a grown man might even be a source of shame, a sign that he had never tested himself, never faced real danger. His skin was his resume, just like the colored teeth, showing he was a veteran of life's battles. But what about more deliberate skin markings? What about tattoos? This is where the historical record gets both exciting and frustratingly hazy. Our most vivid and famous account comes, once again, from the Arab diplomat Ibn Fadlan. When he met the Rus Vikings on the Volga, he described them in detail, from the tips of his toes to his neck. Each man is tattooed in dark green with designs of trees, figures, and the like. This description is incredible. It paints a picture of men covered head to toe in intricate, symbolic. The dark green color is interesting. It might have been a dark blue or black pigment that took on a greenish hue as it aged under the skin, something common with ancient tattooing methods. The trees and figures suggests complex, meaningful designs, not just random squiggles. They could have been depictions of Yggdrasil, the world tree from their mythology, or images of dragons, wolves, or gods like Odin and Thor. And now for the giant, frustrating catch. Ibn Fadlan's account is the only explicit, contemporary written description of Viking tattoos that we have. No Norse saga ever mentions tattoos. No other European account describes them. And, to make matters even more complicated, Sky doesn't survive in the archaeological record. We have their bones, their tools, their clothes, but not their skin. This leaves historians in a huge debate. Was Ibn Fadl in telling the truth? Most scholars believe he was. He was a meticulous observer, and his descriptions of their other habits, like their grooming and trading, are generally considered accurate. So why is his the only account? One theory is that the Vikings he met on the Volga trade route were a specific group, whose customs might have been different from those back in Scandinavia. Perhaps they had adopted the practice of tattooing from the Slavic or steppe peoples they encountered on their travels. Or maybe tattooing was a common practice, but it was so normal to other Northern Europeans that it wasn't considered worthy of comment. It might have been Ibn Fadlan, the outsider, who found it exotic enough to write down. Here's a cool but speculative tidbit. Some scholars have pointed to the intricate, swirling patterns found on Viking art, on their wood carvings, their metalwork, and their runestones, and suggested that these are the very same designs that would have been tattooed on their skin. The famous gripping-based motif, where animals are depicted biting and intertwining with each other in a complex knot, would make for a stunning and powerful tattoo. It's a logical leap, but a compelling one. We may be looking at their tad of flash art every time we look at a Viking brooch or the carving on a ship's prow. You look around the longhouse, at the exposed arms and necks. You don't see any obvious tattoos, but that doesn't mean they aren't there. They could be under the tunics, or perhaps this particular group, in this particular place, didn't practice it, or maybe it was a custom that had faded by this specific time. You realize that beauty here isn't about perfection in the modern sense. It's not about smooth, flawless, ageless skin. It's about skin that shows a life well lived. It's about scars that tell stories. And maybe, just maybe, about ink that carries the symbols of your faith and your identity. It's a beauty that is earned, not preserved, and it makes you look at the lines on your own hands, the small, faded scars from your own life, in a completely new way. They're not flaws. They're history. You take a deep breath, trying to absorb all these new, complex ideas about Viking appearance. The air in the longhouse is still thick with the smell of wood smoke, but you're starting to notice other, more subtle scents now that you're accustomed to the baseline. It's not just the acrid smell of the light pot, or the faint fishy aroma from your homemade kohl. There's something else. Something pleasant. The old warrior with the scarred arms shifts his position by the fire, and you catch a faint, clean fragrance. It's not a perfume. It's more organic, like crushed pine needles or dried herbs. It's a stark contrast to the heavy, animal and smoke smell you first notice. You see the woman with the straw blonde braids hang a bundle of dried plants from the rafters above her sleeping platform. It looks like lavender or something similar. As the smoky air circulates, it carries the faint, calming scent with it. You're uncovering another layer of the Viking sensory world. They weren't just concerned with how they looked. They were also concerned with how they smelled. The stereotype of the smelly barbarian is, once again, proving to be laughably inaccurate. While they certainly didn't have modern deodorants or daily hot showers, they had their own methods for managing body odor and creating a pleasant personal atmosphere. Cleanliness was the first and most important step. As you've already seen, the daily washing and the weekly bath day would have gone a long way in keeping them from being truly foul. But they didn't stop there. They used the natural resources around them as primitive deodorants and perfumes. One of the most common practices was to stuff their clothing with sweet-smelling herbs. Archaeological finds from Viking settlements have included the remnants of plants known for their strong, pleasant aromas. Midaswat was a particular favorite. It has a sweet, almond-like scent and was used to strew on floors and, it's believed, to place in chests with clothes to keep them fresh. They also used yarrow, heather, and various mints. Imagine wearing a wool tunic that has been stored with a bundle of dried mint. As your body heat warms the fabric, it would release a subtle, clean scent throughout the day. This brings us to a wonderfully fragrant little fact. The Vikings may have even used a type of natural deodorant, Sigana moss, which grows abundantly in the bogs of Scandinavia. It is incredibly absorbent and has antiseptic properties. The Vikings used it for everything. They used it as toilet paper, as insulation in their homes, and as wound dressings because it could soak up blood and inhibit infection. Some historians, untrained actors, suggest that a small pad of dried skin and moss tucked into the armpit would have been highly effective, if slightly crunchy. Antiperspirant and deodorant. It's a theory based on practical application of known materials, and it makes perfect sense. You see a man rubbing a fragrant oil into his magnificent beard. It's not just for styling, it's for scenting. They would infuse fats or oils with strong-smelling ingredients. One method was to press pine needles, juniper berries, or birch leaves into a block of animal fat and let it sit for a long time, allowing the fragrant essential oils to transfer. The resulting scented pomade could be used on hair, beards, and skin. So, a well-groomed Viking warrior might smell of pine, smoke, wood, and a hint of lye. It's a complex and not altogether unpleasant cologne. The debate among academics in this area is not about if they use these things. The botanical evidence is clear, but about the intention. Were they actively trying to perfume themselves in the modern sense, to attract a mate or smell appealing? Or were these practices more about ritual and health? For example, many of the herbs they used, like yarrow and meadowswa, also had medicinal properties. Perhaps carrying them in your clothes was seen as a way to ward off sickness as much as it was to smell good. As with many things in the Viking world, the line between the practical, the ritualistic, and the aesthetic was probably very blurry. They likely did it for all those reasons at once. You close your eyes for a moment and just focus on the smells. The dominant note is still wood smoke from the central hearth. Underneath that is the smell of damp earth and old wood. Then you can pick out the other notes. The sharp scent of the pine boughs laid on the floor, the faint lavender from the hanging herbs, the smell of woolen leather from people's clothing, the savory aroma of stew starting to bubble in the cauldron for the evening meal. It's a rich, complex, and deeply alive smell. You realize the story of the Vikings is not just a visual one. It's a full sensory experience. The screech of the file on tooth, the sting of light on the scalp, the sight of colored teeth and smoky eyes, and the complex scent of the world they lived in. It's a far cry from the one-note dirty descriptor they've been saddled with for centuries. Theirs was a world of powerful smells, both pleasant and unpleasant, and they made a conscious effort to curate their own personal scent within it. Your senses are now fully attuned to this ancient world. You've seen the grooming, smelled the fragrances, and felt the chilling implications of their body modifications. Now, you start to notice the colors, not just the brilliant blonde of their hair, but the colors they wear. The popular image of the Viking Age is often one of drab, muted tones, brown, gray, and off-white, the colors of undyed woolen leather. It's a vision of a grim, colorless world. But as you look around the longhouse, you realize that image is completely wrong. It's bursting with color. The woman with the straw blonde hair is wearing a deep blue overdress, held at the shoulders with two gleaming bronze brooches. The red-bearded warrior has a tunic of a witch, madder red, the color of brick. A child runs past wearing a small cloak of a startlingly bright yellow. Even the wall hangings, the woven tapestries that provide some insulation and decoration, are not plain. They are woven with geometric patterns in red, blue, and green. This place is not drab. It's vibrant. The Vikings loved color, and they were masters of creating it using the resources of the natural world. Their clothing was a way to display wealth and status, and nothing said him successful quite like a brightly colored outfit. Dyes were labor-intensive to produce, and some colors were much more difficult to achieve than others, making them the ultimate luxury goods. You watch as a woman works at a large, a bright loom in the corner of the longhouse. She is weaving a piece of cloth, and the threads she is using are a rainbow of different shades. You walk closer, and you can see the hanks of dyed wool hanging nearby, waiting to be woven. There's a beautiful, soft green, a sunny yellow, and a deep, almost purple, blue. So, how did they create these brilliant hues? It was a sophisticated form of natural chemistry. For reds, they used the root of the madder plant. It was a prized dye that could produce a range of colors from pale pink to a deep, rich red, depending on the mordant used, a substance that helps fix the dye to the fabric. For yellows, they used plants like weld or dyer's green weed, which produced a strong, clear yellow. Blues were particularly special. The most common source for blue dye was the woad plant. The process of extracting the blue pigment indigo from woad leaves was complex and smelly, involving fermentation in vats of stale urine. Yes, you read that right. The ammonia in the urine was a key chemical agent in the process. A dyer's workshop would have been an incredibly pungent place. Because of this difficult process, blue was often a high-status color. Here's a fantastic tidbit about a truly elite color. Purple, the famous Tyrian purple, made from sea snails, was the color of Roman emperors and was largely unavailable to the Vikings. However, they had their own, extremely rare way of making a purplish shade. It could be achieved by overdying madder red cloth with woad blue, a two-step process that required twice the labor and materials. A simpler, but far rarer method, was using certain types of lichens. Some lichens, when fermented with ammonia again, hello urine, can produce a dye called orchil, which creates beautiful purple and reddish purple colors. Finding clothing dyed with lichen purple in an archaeological dig is like finding a Viking heir a designer gown. It was the absolute pinnacle of textile luxury. The academic debate in this field is fascinating. It centers on what is known as the archaeological color bias. When textiles are buried in the ground for 1,000 years, the dyes degrade. Reds and yellows, which are made from mineral and plant sources, tend to survive better than blues and purples, which are more fragile organic compounds. This means that when archaeologists excavate a grave, they might find a lot of reddish-brown fragments, leading to the conclusion that Vikings mostly wore red. But in reality, that grave might have once contained a rich tapestry of blues, greens, and purples that have simply faded to nothing. Scientists are now using advanced chemical analysis to detect the faint, invisible traces of these lost dyes, and they are repainting our picture of the Viking Age in much more vibrant colors. You look at your own plain, undyed tunic. It feels like a blank canvas. In this world, wearing color was a choice and a statement. A wealthy chieftain or his wife might wear a cloak of deep blue trimmed with imported silk and fur, their status visible from 100 paces. A farmer might wear a more modest, but still colorful, yellow or green tunic, dyed with plants he grew himself. Even the poorest person would try to add a splash of color with a woven band or a bit of colored thread. Color was light. It was a rebellion against the long, dark winters and the gray seas. It was a sign of prosperity, a mark of skill, and a source of joy. The grim, monochrome Viking of popular imagination is a myth. The real Viking world was a loud, smelly, and gloriously colorful place, and you were standing right in the middle of it, feeling very, very beige, now that your eyes are open to the vibrant colors of their clothing. You start to notice the hardware, the functional undecorative metalwork that holds all this colorful fabric together. It's the Viking equivalent of buttons, zippers, and belt buckles. But it's so much more than that. It's their jewelry, their savings account, and their social media profile, all rolled into one. You look again at the woman in the deep blue dress. At each shoulder, holding up the straps of her apron-style overdress, is a large, oval-shaped brooch. They are made of bronze and are intricately cast with swirling, knotted animal designs. They gleam in the firelight. Hanging between the two brooches is a cascade of colored glass and amber beads, strung on threads of wool or linen. When she moves, the beads make a soft, pleasant clinking sound. It's a statement piece. It says she is a woman of high status, the mistress of a household. This is the quintessential female attire of the Viking Age. The brooches, known to archaeologists as tortoise brooches because of their domed shape, were a standard part of a Scandinavian woman's wardrobe. They were mass-produced in some ways, but the quality and material would vary greatly. A poorer woman might have a simple, undecorated pair made of leaded tin, while a chieftain's wife would have a large, heavy, gilded silver pair, possibly set with precious stones. You see men wearing jewelry too, but of a different kind. The red-bearded warrior has a thick, twisted silver ring on his arm, thin armband. It's not closed. It has a gap, so it can be adjusted. This isn't just decoration. It's wearable wealth, in an economy that didn't always use coins, especially in the earlier Viking period. Wealth was often stored and transported in the form of precious metal. A warrior or trader would carry his net worth on his arm if he needed to buy something: a sword, a cow, a round of meat for his friends. He could literally take a chisel and hammer and chop off a piece of his armband. This is where the term hack silver comes from. Archaeologists find hoards of this stuff: chopped up bracelets, rings, and brooches, all valued purely by their weight in silver. This leads to a really cool and very practical aspect of Viking jewelry. It was designed to be divisible. Many arm rings and neck rings were scored with notches at regular intervals, making it easier to break off a standardized amount of silver. It was a brilliantly simple system. Your jewelry was your bank, and you could make withdrawals whenever you needed to. You notice a man with a particularly magnificent piece of jewelry. It's a large, circular brooch pinned to his cloak at his right shoulder. It's a pin annular brooch, an open ring with a long, sharp pin. It's heavy, made of silver, and decorated with incredibly fine, detailed patterns. This brooch is more than just a fastener. It's a display of power. It keeps his cloak in place while leaving his sword arm free. The sheer amount of silver in it could probably buy a small farm. The materials they used were varied. Bronze was common for everyday brooches. Silver was the metal of choice for displaying wealth, much of it acquired through raiding and trading with the Islamic Caliphate, Essen, the Byzantine Empire. Gold was the ultimate luxury, reserved for the absolute top tier of society, kings and the highest-ranking chieftains. But they also loved color in their jewelry. They used amber, a fossilized tree resin that washed up on the shores of the Baltic Sea, for beads and pendants. They were masters of glass, making uncreated, stunning, multicolored glass beads, often with intricate eye patterns. And they valued semi-precious stones like carnelian from the East and jet from Britain. The academic debate here often revolves around the meaning of the specific imagery. We see all these swirling beasts and complex knots. But what did they mean to the Vikings? Were they just decoration, the way we might use a floral pattern today? Or did each animal, a wolf, a dragon, a raven, have a specific symbolic meaning, perhaps representing a god or a mythical creature that the wearer wanted to be associated with? For instance, wearing a wolf motif might align you with Odin, who was accompanied by his two wolves, Jerry and Fret. It's almost certain that these symbols were meaningful. But the exact language of Viking jewelry is something we have lost and can only try to reconstruct. You look at the beads hanging from the woman's breeches. A string of blue and white glass beads, a lump of sunny, translucent amber, a single red carnelian bead. Each one was a small treasure, acquired through trade or travel. Her necklace was a map of her world, a collection of her family's connections and wealth. You feel the simple, rough fabric of your own tunic. It has no fastener, no adornments. You are a blank slate. In this world, you are what you wear. And more importantly, you are what you pin to your clothes. Your jewelry tells the story of your wealth, your travels, your status, and your beliefs. Without it, you're silent. You've spent so much time dissecting the finer details, the hair, the teeth, the jewelry, that you almost miss the bigger picture, the canvas on which all these details are painted, their bodies. You stand back and take in the general physique of the people in the longhouse. There's an undeniable theme: strength. These are not slender, delicate people. The men are broad-shouldered, with thick necks and powerful arms. Their muscles earned from rowing long ships, swinging axes, and farming the hard, rocky soil. The women, too, possess a sturdiness that speaks of physical labor. They have strong backs from working the loom, carrying heavy buckets of water, and managing the farmstead. There's a tangible sense of capability radiating from them. This is the foundational beauty standard, the one upon which all others are built. Before you can worry about the color of your hair or the pigment in your teeth, you need to have a body that works. In this world, survival is a daily struggle. A weak or frail body is a liability, not just to yourself, but to your entire family and community. Attractiveness is inextricably linked to competence. You watch as a group of men decide to move a large, fallen log that's blocking a path near the longhouse. There's no machinery, no hydraulics. There's just them. They gather around the log, find their grips, and with a series of coordinated grunts and heave, they lift and shift the immense weight. It's a raw display of functional strength. You notice that the man with the filed teeth and the red-bearded warrior are at the center of the effort. Their muscles straining. Their physical power is as much a part of their status as their grooming and jewelry. This emphasis on a strong physique is deeply embedded in their culture and mythology. Their gods were not ethereal, wispy beings. Thor was a god of immense strength. His defining feature, his powerful build and his mighty hammer. The heroes of their sagas are constantly praised for their physical prowess, their ability to run, jump, swim long distances, and fight for hours. In the saga of Grettir the Strong, the hero's identity is his strength. Being strong was heroic. It was divine. This created immense social pressure to maintain a capable body. For a man, this meant being strong enough for combatant for the back-breaking labor of a Viking Age farmer or craftsman. For a woman, it meant being robust enough to run a large and complex household, which was a physically demanding job, and, crucially, to survive childbirth, which was a frequent, undangerous event. A strong, wide-hipped woman was likely seen as beautiful because she looked like she could produce healthy heirs and live to raise them. Here's a fascinating and slightly grim detail that underscores this point. Analysis of Viking skeletons reveals a life of hard physical toil. Archaeologists can see the evidence of this labor written on the bones. They find extensive muscle attachment marks, indicating large, powerful muscles. They also find high rates of degenerative joint disease, like arthritis, even in relatively young individuals. Their joints were simply worn out from a lifetime of heavy lifting, rowing, and repetitive physical tasks. They paid a high price for the strength that their society valued so much. The academic controversy here is a subtle one. While everyone agrees that a strong, capable body was the ideal, was there a more specific ideal body type beyond that? Did they have the Viking equivalent of a body build aesthetic, theorizing a certain set of defined muscles? Or was it purely about functional, farm-strong power? The sagas sometimes give us clues, praising men with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, which sounds surprisingly modern. However, artistic depictions are often too stylized to be a reliable guide. We don't know if they were more impressed by a lean, ripped warrior or a massive, barrel-chested berserker. It was likely a spectrum, with different types of strength being valued for different roles. You see a young boy trying to lift a log that's far too heavy for him. He strains, his face turning red, but it doesn't budge. The older scarred warrior comes over, but he doesn't lift it for him. He shows the boy how to position his body, how to lift with his legs, not his back. It's a lesson. You are not just born strong. You must cultivate it. Strength is a skill, something to be learned and practiced from a young age. You look down at your own body. By modern standards, you might be perfectly fit. But by their standards, could you row a long ship for 12 hours straight? Could you haul a net full of fish from the sea? Could you grind grain 4 hours with a heavy stone quern? You suddenly feel soft, untested. This is the bedrock of Viking beauty. The hairstyles, the jewelry, the colored teeth. Those are the decorations on the house. But the house itself, the foundation, is a body that can withstand the harsh realities of this world. To be beautiful here is to be strong. To be attractive is to be alive. And to be a survivor. Everything else is just an accessory. You shift your focus to the women of the longhouse, watching them as they go about their afternoon. The initial impression of sturdiness holds true. But as you observe more closely, you see the nuances of female beauty in this world. It's a far cry from a delicate, ornamental ideal, the most respected and, it seems, the most attractive women are the ones who are the most competent. You see the woman with the tortoise brooches and the cascade of beads. She isn't sitting idly, just directing the work of the household with an air of absolute authority. She's checking the stores of dried fish, tasting the stew simmering over the fire, instructing a younger girl on how to properly mend a tear in a woolen cloak. Her hands, though adorned with a silver ring, are not soft and manicured. They are capable, callous, and strong. She is the HUS Freja, the lady of the house, and her domain is this entire settlement. Her husband might be the chieftain, but she is the CEO. This is the core of feminine beauty in the Viking Age. Capability. A beautiful woman was a skilled woman. She knew how to spin wool, weave cloth, preserve food, manage supplies, and practice basic medicine with herbs. The sagas are filled with descriptions of formidable women who are praised not just for their fair hair or bright eyes, but for being wise and capable or skilled in all manner of handiwork. One of the most powerful symbols of a woman's status and skill was her set of keys. The mistress of the house wore the keys to the food storehouses and chests on a chain or cord hanging from her brooches. These keys were a tangible representation of her power and authority. She controlled the family's wealth and resources. To lose the keys was a source of great shame. A woman who was a good manager, who ran a prosperous and well-fed household, was seen as a great prize. Her competence made her incredibly attractive, because it guaranteed the success and survival of the family. Here's a cool and slightly unexpected fact about the power of Viking women. They retained a surprising degree of legal and economic independence. Unlike in many other parts of contemporary Europe, Viking women could inherit property. They had the right to a divorce if they were mistreated, and they brought a dowry into a marriage that legally remained their own property. A strong, intelligent woman wasn't just an asset. She was a partner in the family enterprise. This legal standing reinforced the idea that her worth and thus her attractiveness was tied to her abilities, not just her lineage or passive beauty. You watch as a younger woman sits at a drop spindle, effortlessly spinning raw wool into a fine, strong thread. Her movements are graceful and practiced, a dance of hand and fiber that she has probably been doing since she was a small child. Another woman is grinding barley in a large stone quern, a physically demanding task that requires significant upper body strength. She pushes the heavy top stone around and around, her shoulders and back muscles working in a steady rhythm. There is a beauty in this display of strength and skill. It's the beauty of productivity, of creation, of sustenance. The academic debate here is about the extent to which women participated in activities we might traditionally consider male. The popular image of the shield maiden, the female warrior who fought alongside men, is a hot topic. The sagas in some historical accounts, like that of the historians Axogrammaticus, mention them. For a long time, these were dismissed as literary fantasy. However, recent archaeological finds have challenged this. A famous, lavish warrior grave from the Viking settlement of Birka in Sweden, long assumed to be the grave of a high-ranking male warrior, was subjected to DNA analysis. The results showed the skeleton was biologically female. This has thrown the historical community into an uproar of debate. Was this woman a true shield maiden, a military commander, or was she a woman of high status who was buried with the symbols of a warrior for ritualistic or symbolic reasons? We don't have a definitive answer, but the mere possibility suggests that the Viking ideal of female strength might have extended, for some women at least, all the way to the battlefield. You see two young women practicing with shields and wooden practice swords, laughing as one disarms the other. It seems less like formal training and more like a game. But it speaks to a culture where women were not expected to be helpless damsels. They were expected to be able to defend themselves in their homes, especially when the men were away on raids or trading voyages. The ideal Viking woman, then, was a complex and powerful figure. She was strong, skilled, and smart. Her beauty was not in her passivity, but in her agency. It was in the confident way she managed her household, the skillful way she created textiles, and the strength with which she faced the challenges of her life. She was no one's delicate flower. She was the strong, foundational root that allowed the entire community to grow. Having explored the formidable ideal of Viking womanhood, you turn your attention back to the men. You've established that raw, functional strength was the baseline requirement, the ticket to the game. But what did the ideal male physique actually look like? What was the perfect Viking man? Beyond just being strong, you observe the hunter with the filed teeth and the red-bearded warrior, as they share a horn of mead by the fire. They're what you might call the alphas of this longhorn. They are not just strong. They carry themselves with a specific kind of physical confidence. Their bodies are tools, honed by a lifetime of specific activities. The primary sculptor of the male Viking body was labor and combat. Think about the key activities. Rowing. This develops powerful backs, shoulders, and core strength. The ambush. Rhythmic pulling on an oar would build the lots and traps, creating that distinctive broad-shouldered silhouette. Farming. Swinging a scythe. Chopping wood. Plowing a field. These are full-body workouts that build dense, practical muscle, and, of course, fighting. Wielding a heavy shield in one hand and an axe or sword in the other requires tremendous upper body and grip strength. The ideal physique, therefore, was not the puffy, isolated muscle look of a modern bodybuilder. It was the lean, sinewy, and incredibly dense muscle of a functional athlete. They would have looked more like a modern-day lumberjack or a strongman competitor than a magazine cover model. Their bodies were a direct reflection of their lifestyle. You couldn't fake it. You couldn't spend an hour in the gym and then go back to a desk job. Your body was the honest and unavoidable product of your daily exertions. The Norse sagas often provide descriptions of their heroes that give us clues to this ideal. They are frequently described as tall and strong. Height was clearly a valued trait. In a world of hand-to-hand combat, a taller man with a longer reach had a distinct advantage. Heroes are also praised for being feminine, a word that means agile, quick, and nimble, so it was just about brute strength. The ideal warrior was also fast on his feet, able to dodge a blow or leap over an obstacle. He was a complete physical package. This leads to a little-known but interesting physical feat that was considered a mark of a great warrior: the ability to swim long distances in cold water, often while wearing male armor. The sagas contain several swimming contests between heroes. In the Orkneyinga saga, Rorog Genvald Kali, K. Olsen brags about his 9 skills, and one of them is swimming. This tells you that cardiovascular endurance and resilience to cold were just as important as the ability to lift heavy things. A truly elite Viking man had to have stamina as well as strength. You watch as some of the younger men engage in a friendly wrestling match outside the longhouse. It's a sport known as Gilima, a form of Scandinavian folk wrestling that is still practiced today. It's less about brute force and more about leverage, balance, and quickness. They grab each other by the belt or tunic, trying to throw their opponent off balance. It's a game, but it's also training, honing the exact skills of agility and core strength they would need in a real fight. The academic debate here centers on the diversity of male body types, while the sagas praise the tall, strong, and agile hero. What about the other men? What about the merchants, the poets, the craftsmen, the farmers? Surely they weren't all elite warrior athletes. The reality is that there would have been a wide range of body types, and different forms of maleness would have been respected. A skilled blacksmith with powerful arms and a thick torso, strong from a lifetime at the forge, would have been highly respected, even if he wasn't as fast or as tall as a famous raider. A successful merchant might have been softer in the middle, but his wealth and connections brought their own kind of power and prestige. However, the cultural ideal, the image held up in stories and songs, was undoubtedly the warrior athlete. This is the man that other men measured themselves against. This is the image that likely drove the young men to push themselves in training, to endure the hardships of raiding, and to build the strong, capable bodies that were so admired. You look at the red-bearded warrior. He has the broad shoulders from rowing, the powerful forearms from swinging an axe, and the solid, grounded stance of a man who is comfortable with his own physical power. His body is not a work of art in the classical sense. It's a well-maintained, high-performance machine, built for a specific and brutal purpose. It's a body that says, I can build a house, I can sail a ship, and I can defend my family. In the Viking world, there was no higher form of male beauty. You've seen the ideals: the golden hair, the decorated teeth, the strong and capable bodies, the intricate braids and colorful clothes. But what about the people who didn't, or couldn't? Meet these exacting standards. What was life like if you were a man with a patchy beard? A woman who was considered conventionally attractive? Or someone who was simply born with the wrong hair color? The answer, you discover, is often recorded in one of the Vikings' favorite pastimes, giving each other brutally honest, and often cruel, nicknames. You're sitting by the fire, listening to the conversation's ebb and flow. You hear the red-bearded warrior call out to a man across the longhouse. The man is short, a bit stout, and has a mop of unruly black hair. The name the warrior uses isn't his given name. He calls him Tuafe, and a few people chuckle. Later, you manage to ask someone what it means. It means tuft or thicket, a direct and unflattering commentary on his messy hair, a clear deviation from the neat, braided ideal. This was incredibly common. The Norse sagas are littered with characters who are known almost exclusively by their nicknames, and a huge number of these are based on physical appearance, often highlighting a perceived flaw. These weren't just friendly joshing. They could be genuinely insulting. They were a form of social commentary, a way for the community to enforce its standards by publicly marking those who fell short. Imagine being a man named Flat Nose or a woman called Twisted Lip. These are real examples from the historical record. There was a famous Icelandic chieftain known as Ugly Halli. His name was just Halli. His defining characteristic, the one that went before his name, was his ugliness. This tells you that appearance was a private matter. It was a public one, open for comment and judgment. This is where the brutal side of their social world comes into sharp focus. In a small, close-knit community like this, there's nowhere to hide. If you didn't fit the mold, everyone knew it, and they weren't afraid to talk about it. Here's a particularly telling and rather sad example from the sagas. In the Laxdla saga, there's a character named Hoskuld. He has a beautiful, incapable wife named Joran, but he also has a concubine, an Irish slave princess named Melkor Ka. Hoskuld is so infatuated with Melkor Ka's beauty that he neglects his wife. In a fit of jealous rage, Joran confronts her husband and says, "I see that you find me less beautiful now, but I will not be called broad pants Joran for long." It's a strange insult, but it's clearly directed at her appearance, perhaps implying she has become stout or unfashionable. The fact that she fears this becoming her nickname shows how powerful and humiliating these labels could be. The academic debate here is about the tone of these nicknames. Were they always meant to be cruel? Or could they sometimes be affectionate? A form of gentle ribbing among friends? The answer is almost certainly both. A name like the Wise or Fairhair was obviously a compliment, but a name like Coal Biter, implying someone who huddles so close to the fire for warmth his face is in the coals or stinking, where the unlucky is hard to interpret as friendly. It likely depended heavily on who was saying it and in what context. A friend calling you thicket hair might be a joke. An enemy shouting it across a battlefield would be a grave insult. You see the man called to F.A. later, sitting by himself, combing his thick, dark hair with a simple wooden comb. H.E.S. trying to make it neat, to make it conform, but it's just not the right texture or color. There's a slump to his shoulders, a sense of resignation. He will always be Tuafe. The pressure was immense. If you were a man who didn't grow a proper beard, you might be called Skeglaws s beardless, an insult that questioned your very masculinity. If you were born with a physical disability, you might be given a name that described it for the rest of your life, like Clubfoot. This practice reveals the dark side of a society with such strong, clearly defined beauty standards. For those who met the standards, life was good. They were praised, admired, and given complimentary nicknames like the handsome. But for those on the outside, the community could be a harsh and unforgiving mirror, constantly reflecting their perceived flaws back at them. It was a powerful tool for social cohesion, but it came at a high personal cost for those who didn't fit in. The desire to avoid a cruel nickname would have been a powerful motivator to try and conform, to bleach your hair, to work out, to dress well, doing everything you could to avoid becoming the butt of the joke. Days turn into a week, and the routines of the longhouse become your own. You've tried braiding your hair with limited success. You've mastered the art of fish-scented eyeliner, and you've decided to firmly pass on the dental modifications. You start to wonder how we, in the future, know all of this. Besides a few scattered texts like Ibn Fadlan's accountant, the often exaggerated sagas. Where does this intimate knowledge come from? The answer, you realize, lies in what they left behind, not in what they wrote, but in what they buried. The grave of a Viking is a time capsule, a carefully curated collection of objects that were meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. And it's by carefully excavating and studying these graves that archaeologists have become the chief interpreters of their lost world of beauty. You imagine yourself 1,000 years in the future, a scientist in a lab coat, carefully brushing dirt from a delicate object. That object is the very bone comb that the red-bearded warrior is using right now to groom his magnificent beard. In the future, that comb will be a treasure. It will be analyzed, its material identified as deer antler. The tiny rivets holding it together will be identified as iron. Microscopic analysis of the gunk trapped between its teeth will reveal traces of human hair, pollen from local trees, and maybe even the nits of head lice, giving an uncensored snapshot of their daily hygiene. This is how the story is pieced together. Every object in a grave tells a part of the story. The tortoise brooches on the woman in blue. They tell us about fashion, status, and gender roles. The hex silver armband on the warrior. It tells us about their economy and the concept of portable wealth. The tiny iron razors and bronze tweezers found in a man's grave. They scream to us across the centuries that this man cared deeply about his appearance. One of the most telling discoveries is the sheer number of grooming tools found in graves. It's not a rare occurrence. Combs, in particular, are one of the most common grave goods for both men and women. This isn't random. People were deliberately choosing to be buried with their combs. This suggests the comb was more than just a tool. It was a fundamental part of their personal identity. To enter the afterlife without your comb would be like showing up to a party without your shoes. You would be incomplete. Here's a fantastic little detail that shows the depth of this connection. Archaeologists have found combs with runic inscriptions on them. Some just say the owner's name, like this comb belongs to Thorfast, but others are more poetic. One famous comb simply has the word comb carved on it, in case you are confused. Another, however, has been interpreted as a charm, perhaps to keep the user's hair healthy and strong. The act of combing was so important, it was tied up with magic and belief. Of course, the interpretation of grave goods is where some of the most heated academic debates occur. When we find a grave with a man buried with his sword, shield, and axe, it's easy to say, he was a warrior. But what about when we find a woman buried with a spear, as in the Burka shield made on grave, or a blacksmith buried with a set of scales and weights, suggesting he was also a traitor? The objects raise as many questions as they answer. A classic example is the ear spoon, that little metal scoop on the end of a stick you saw in the grooming kits. For a long time, archaeologists identified them as just that, a tool for cleaning earwax. But some scholars have challenged this. They argue the little scoops might have been used for handling precious materials, like powdered pigments for painting, or even for taking a small measure of a medicinal herb or a drug. The debate is ongoing. The humble ear spoon might be a hygiene tool, a drug paraphernalia, or a craftsman's implement. We see the object, but we have to fight to reconstruct its true function and meaning. You look around the longhouse, at the people and their possessions, the wooden bowl, the clay pot, the iron knife, the bone needle. To them, these are just everyday objects. But to the future, they are precious clues. They are the puzzle pieces that will allow us to rebuild their world. The Vikings didn't leave behind a detailed diary of their beauty standards. They didn't have fashion magazines. Instead, they left their story in the earth. They buried their dead with the things they valued most, the things that define them. And by carefully unearthing these treasures, a string of glass beads, a silver armband, a beautifully carved comb, we can listen to the silent stories they tell about what it meant to be a Viking, and what it meant to be beautiful. Your understanding of Viking beauty has been built from the inside out, from your own observations within the longhouse and your knowledge of the archaeological wreck. But now, you get a chance to see it from a completely different perspective, that of a total outsider, a visitor who arrives at your settlement. He is not a Viking. He is a merchant from the south, perhaps from Francia, or even further, from the lands the Vikings call kohl, the great city of Constantinople. He arrives with several guards and pack horses laden with goods, fine cloth, wine in clay amphorae, and silver coins. His appearance is a stark contrast to the people around you. He is shorter, with dark, curly hair cut close to his head and a neatly trimmed beard that is entirely black. He wears fine, tailored woolen soft leather shoes. He looks at the Vikings with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and disdain. And you, for the first time, can see your new companions through his eyes. What does he see? He sees giants. The average Viking, particularly the men, are taller than him, a result of a protein-rich diet of fish and meat. He sees a riot of blonde hair, some natural, some clearly artificial, all of it braided in ways that seem wild and barbaric to him. He sees the men's beards, some of them impossibly long and intricately plaited, others bleached to a shocking yellow. He sees the smoky kohl around their eyes. To him, coming from a more civilized Roman-influenced culture, this might seem savage and uncivilized, a warrior's paint rather than a refined cosmetic. He sees the flash of the fildant-colored teeth and likely shudders in horror, seeing it as monstrous self-mutilation. This is the perspective that has colored so much of history. The accounts we have of Vikings were often written by their victims or their rivals. The monks of Lindisfarne, whose monastery was sacked in the first major Viking raid on England, weren't exactly inclined to write a glowing review of their attackers' fashion choices. They described them as heathen, savage, and wolf-like. These descriptions were powerful propaganda, creating the enduring image of the mindless, filthy barbarian. You overhear the visiting merchant talking to one of his guards in a language you can partially understand. He uses words that translate to loud, ostentatious, and proud. He is both repulsed and fascinated by their lack of subtlety. Their bright, colorful clothes, their heavy, clanking jewelry, their bold hairstyles. It all strikes him as a bit much. His own culture values understated elegance. There's values conspicuous display. Here's a great historical example of this clash of perspectives. We have the account of the aforementioned Arab diplomat ibn Fadlan. He was a sophisticated, devout Muslim from the highly advanced Abbasid Caliphate. when he met the Rus Vikings. He was meticulous in his descriptions, but his disgust is palpable. He calls them the filthiest of God's creatures for sharing a water basin. He describes their leader's funeral, a complex and violent ritual, with horrified fascination. Yet, in the same account, he is forced to admit they are perfect physical specimens, tall as date palms, blond and ruddy. He is simultaneously repulsed by their habits and impressed by their physique. His account is a perfect storm of cultural misunderstanding and grudging admiration. The academic debate here is crucial. How do we balance these outside accounts with the archaeological evidence? The outsider, like Ibn Fadl and or our visiting merchant, sees the what but often completely misinterprets the why. He sees the shared water basin as filth, not as a communal morning ritual. He sees the filed teeth as savagery, not as a status symbol. Archaeology, on the other hand, gives us the physical proof. The combs, the razors, the jewelry. That shows a deep cultural investment in grooming and appearance. It gives us their side of the story, without the filter of a foreign observer's bias. The visiting merchant is now trying to trade with the chieftain, the red-bearded warrior. The chieftain is offering furs in exchange for a sword. The merchant holds the sword, a beautiful blade of southern craftsmanship. The chieftain smiles, a friendly gesture in his culture, but his braided beard, kohl-rimmed eyes, and tall stature make the smile seem like a threat to the smaller man. The merchant, intimidated, quickly agrees to a price that is probably too low. In this moment, you see the Viking aesthetic in action. It's not just about looking good for each other. It's a tool. It's a projection of power that gives them a psychological edge in their interactions with other cultures. You look from the nervous, dark-clad merchant to the confident, colorful Vikings. You realize that beauty is never universal. It's a local language. And to an outsider who doesn't speak that language, the loudest and most confident statements can easily be misunderstood as just noise and aggression. The brutal beauty of the Vikings was for them a source of pride and identity. But for the rest of the world, it was often just brutal. The merchant and his entourage have departed, their fine southern goods exchanged for furs and amber. The brief window into an outsider's perspective is closed, and you are once again fully immersed in the world of the longhouse. A sense of exhaustion settles over you, but it's not physical. It's a mental fatigue, born from the realization of just how much work it is to simply be a Viking. You start to add it all up in your head, like a running tally of time and effort. It's a full-time job, and the job is yourself. The day begins before dawn, with the icy shock of a wash in cold water. Then comes the hair. If you're not one of the lucky natural blondes, you must face the wipe off, the burning, the waiting, the rinsing, the damage control. This isn't a weekly touch-up to keep the roots at bay. It's a regular, painful chore. If your hair survives, then comes the combing. Meticulously, patiently, you must de-angle and smooth every strand. Then, the braiding, a complex, time-consuming art form that often requires the help of another person. For men, this entire process is duplicated for the beard. Once the hair is handled, you move to the face. You must prepare your kohl, grinding the charcoal or jet, mixing it with fat, and then carefully applying it for that perfect, smoky, intimidating gaze. If you're a man of a certain status, you have to consider your dental work. Is it time to have the grooves deepened? Does the color inlay need a touch-up? This requires a visit to a specialist and another session of endured pain. Then there's the body. The constant physical exertion isn't a choice. It's a necessity, but to maintain the ideal physique. You must push yourself beyond the baseline. The wrestling, the swimming, the practice with weapons. It's all part of honing the body into a tool and a status symbol. There are no rest days. And we haven't even gotten to the clothes yet. Your colorful tunic was bought at a store. The wool came from your own sheep. It had to be sheared, cleaned, carded, and then spun into thread. A monstrously time-consuming task done by the women of the household. Then the thread had to be dyed, which meant gathering the correct plants, preparing the dye that's urine and doll, and carefully coloring the wool. Finally, it had to be woven into cloth on a loom, then cut and stitched by hand into a garment. That one blue tunic use, or represents hundreds of hours of labor. And the jewelry. The bronze brooches work asked for molds. The silver arm rings were hammered and twisted into shape by a smith. The glass beads were fired in a kiln. All of it, every single piece, was handmade. You lean back against a wooden post, watching the fire dance, and it hits you. Maintaining the Viking standard of beauty was a relentless, all-consuming task. It required pain, patience, skill, and a huge investment of time and resources. Their appearance was an afterthought. It was a central project of their lives. This is a point that historians and archaeologists often try to emphasize. Yet it's easy to miss. We see the beautiful finished product in a museum case, a gleaming silver brooch, but we don't see the hours of work that went into it. We read a saga description of a golden-haired hero, but we don't feel the sting of the lie on his scalp. The effortless I woke up like this aesthetic did not exist in the Viking Age. Theirs was an aesthetic of maximum effort. Why go to all this trouble? The academic consensus is that in a largely pre-literate society, your appearance was your primary text. It was your resume, your passport, your social media profile, and your political party affiliation, all written on your body. You couldn't just tell people who you were. You had to show them. Your blonde hair showed you adhered to the cultural ideal. Your strong body showed your worth in a fight or on a farm. Your colorful clothes and silver jewelry showed your wealth and status. Your filed teeth showed you belonged to an exclusive group. They were constantly performing their identity, and the stage was their own body. It was a brutal and impossible standard, not just because of the pain involved, but because of the sheer, unending effort it required. It was a competition, and the goal was to craft a physical self that was as impressive, as intimidating, and as memorable as a hero from the sagas. Looking around the longhouse now, you don't just see people, you see living works of art, each one sculpted through immense, and often painful, labor. The day is ending. The sun, which you rarely see from inside the longhouse, is set, and the world outside has been painted in the deep blues and purples of a northern twilight. The central fire has been built up, and it now casts a warm, dancing glow that pushes back the shadows to the corners of the vast room. The smell of roasting meat and simmering still fills the air, a rich and comforting aroma that signals the end of work and the beginning of rest. You take a walk outside, down to the edge of the fjord. The water is as still as dark glass, perfectly mirroring the star-dusted sky and the snow-capped peaks of the mountains on the other side. The air is so cold and clean, it feels sharp in your lungs. It's a moment of profound peace, a stark contrast to the smoky, crowded, and demanding world of the longhouse. You catch your own reflection in the water. It's a blurry, imperfect mirror, but you can make out the changes. Your hair is lighter than when you arrived, streaked with the results of a cautious, single application of lye soap. It's braided, not very neatly, but it's an attempt. There are faint, smudged remnants of kohl around your eyes. Your tunic is still plain, but you've been gifted a small string of blue glass beads by one of the women, a gesture of acceptance, and you wear it around your neck. You have changed. You have bent, just a little, to the immense pressure of this place. You've participated in its rituals of beauty, felt the sting, and understood the commitment. You look at your reflection and you see a ghost, a hybrid of two worlds. This is the final, personal lesson of your journey. Beauty standards, no matter how alien or brutal they seem, are a form of communication. They are a language of belonging. To participate in them is to say, I am one of you. I understand the rules. I am willing to do the work. The why, the files, the needles, the combs. They are all tools for inscribing the story of a community onto the individual. You think about the hunter with his terrifying, beautiful teeth. In your world, he would be afraid, an outcast. Here, he is a man of status and pride. You think of the woman with her tortoise brooches and keys, a symbol of domestic power that has no modern equivalent. You realize that brutal and beautiful are not opposites. In the Viking world, they were two sides of the same coin. The brutality of the process was what gave the beauty its meaning. It was proof of your toughness, your wealth, your dedication. The more you suffer for your beauty, the more valuable it became. The enduring academic question that hangs over all of this is a simple one. Was it worth it? From a modern perspective, filled with ideas about individualism and natural beauty, it seems like a terrible burden. But from their perspective, in a world of constant uncertainty, danger, and hardship, perhaps this rigid, demanding structure of appearance was a source of comfort. It was a set of rules you could control in a world you counted. It gave you a way to build your identity, to earn respect, and to find your place in the grand, smoky tapestry of the clan. You look back at the longhouse. Light spills from the open doorway, and you can hear the sound of laughter, of storytelling, of life. These people, who subject themselves to such harsh rituals, have also created a world of incredible warmth, community, and resilience. Their brutal beauty standards were not just about vanity. They were about creating a strong, unified, and visually stunning identity in the face of a harshened and forgiving world. It was a way of shouting their existence into the wind, of carving their image onto the landscape of history. You turn away from your reflection in the fjord and walk back towards the warmth and delight of the longhouse. You are a part of this world now, a novice speaker in its complex visual language. You understand that beauty is pain, but you also understand that here, beauty is strength, beauty is identity, and beauty is survival. The fire in the longhouse is now just a bed of glowing embers, casting a soft, deep orange light on the sleeping forms around you. The stories have been told, the mead has been drunk, and a profound quiet has settled over the great hall, punctuated only by the soft breathing of sleep and the occasional sigh of the wind outside. You lie back on your platform, pulling the heavy furs up to your chin. The smoky air no longer stings your eyes. The hard wooden platform feels familiar, almost comfortable. The world of the Vikings, once so strange and intimidating, has become the backdrop to your own rest. You can feel the gentle weight of the glass beads on your collarbone. You can almost feel the phantom itch of the lye soap on your scalp. The images of the day drift through your mind not as shocking discoveries, but as simple facts of life. The glint of a silver brooch, the intricate pattern of a braid, the dark line of kohl around a pair of pale blue eyes, the terrifying and beautiful smile of a warrior. These images begin to soften, losing their sharp edges, swirling together into the patterns of a dream. The world outside, the longhouse fades away. The fjord, the mountains, the stars, they all dissolve into the warm, smoky darkness of this ancient room. You are sinking now, deeper into the quiet, letting the rhythmic breathing of the sleepers become a lullaby. The story is over. The journey is complete. There is nothing left to do but drift on the slow, gentle river of sleep, carrying the echoes of this brutal, beautiful world with you into the quiet lands of your own dreams.